Obrigado, Tom. Acho que os aplausos já mostram a empolgação. E, infelizmente, eu fui informado de que vamos ter que cumprir o horário rigorosamente. Então, não vamos ter tempo para muitas perguntas. Primeira pergunta, recebemos algumas da plateia. Primeira pergunta. Como foi que Hoover acabou recebendo o rótulo de ser um presidente pró-laissez-faire?
Yeah. Okay. Good question. I've wondered this myself, given that Herbert Hoover, and I know this is a very educated audience, but I don't want to assume people know all about American presidents, especially when you don't have to. It's better for you not to know. But Hoover was the president at the time of the stock market crash, and Hoover was the most interventionist president with regard to the economy that had ever been seen in American history. And it's interesting that when Franklin Roosevelt ran against him in 1932, Roosevelt's vice presidential nominee accused Hoover of taking us down the path to socialism. He didn't say, oh, Hoover isn't doing anything. Why doesn't he intervene? No, everyone knew that that wasn't true. So how did he get this reputation? And such that for decades afterward, until some important revisionist work was done, including by Murray Rothbard, everyone took this for granted. My own suspicion is partly that people wanted to contrast the glorious and admired Franklin Roosevelt with an ogre. And so they made Hoover out to seem worse than he was. But I think the more important reason is that Hoover himself, during the 1930s, postured as an opponent of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal program. And I think people took him at his word. They listened to his pretty speeches, they read his book, and they said, well, gosh, I guess this guy believes in the free market. Whereas, in fact, Franklin Roosevelt's own aide, I think it was Rexford Tugwell, actually admitted, really, the programs of Roosevelt's New Deal are all extrapolated from what Hoover did. So if you look closely, you see the Hoover roots of these programs, but if all you're doing is listening to Hoover's words, it sounds like he's against this root and branch. It's just like the Republican Party in the U.S. today. You would never know that half of them, at the state level, favor a health system exactly like the one they are against now. But the media doesn't point this out. The media says, oh, the Republicans are for the free market. They all favor the free market, even though, 10 seconds ago they said the opposite. But they read whatever the current speech is, the media just accepts this at face value. And I think this happened with Hoover. They accepted his protest that he was against FDR at face value, when in fact FDR was simply building on what Hoover had done. Maybe he didn't like the extent to which to which Roosevelt had gone. But nevertheless, the programs ultimately came from him himself. Okay.
Próxima pergunta, lembrando que se alguém quiser fazer perguntas diretamente, temos as belas moças com os microfones aí ao lado. O Mises Institute tem um importante papel na pesquisa da história econômica. Como dotar historiadores para que tenham conhecimento da teoria econômica? Como foram os seus passos para adquirir o conhecimento na ciência econômica?
Okay. Well, first of all, we can shame them into knowing it by, frankly, ridiculing the work of those who just. Let me put it this way: there are some episodes in U.S. history that most historians know nothing about. In the 19th century, there was controversy in the U.S. about gold versus silver and paper money. Most historians don't know the first thing about what any of this was about. So when they just write whatever the textbook from 10 years ago said. They just write that. They hope no student brings it up, and they go on. And I'm not being facetious. This is real. So we need to find these weak spots and just pounce, just mercilessly on them. Any time a historian tries to claim Herbert Hoover did nothing, he needs to be rhetorically now kicked in the teeth, rhetorically, so that maybe next time, now that we have the internet and the whole world can see that what this guy just said is ludicrously at odds with reality, maybe they'll be a little careful about saying it next time, because they don't want 500 comments in the comments section saying, "You jerk, don't you know about this program, that program, that program, that program, that program?" So informed people bombarding these people with comments on the blogs will do one of two things. It'll either get us all banned from these blogs, or it will make them more cautious in the future. Maybe they'll repeat a different fallacy next time and stay away from this one. But how did I learn stuff? I learned it from the Mises Institute. I mean, there's no getting around that. I basically favored the free market, but I didn't know anything about the Austrian school until I saw an ad in a magazine for the summer program of the Mises Institute, Mises University, 1 week long. Lou, I don't even remember what magazine this would have been. And I thought, well, hey, that sounds great. I'd love to do this. So they send you the readings. This is before the internet. You know, they had to put the articles in the mail and send them to you. And I read, they had required readings and recommended readings. I was such a geek that, see how good your English is, if you know the word geek. If not, you can figure out from context what it means. But that I read all the recommended I was addicted to this. I said, this is true. I believe this stuff. It makes sense. I read all the recommended readings, too, because I lived right near my college. My house was right nearby. I could use the university library all summer and track down all these journal articles. And once I went to the Mises University for that week, I never looked back. I knew that fundamentally that the Austrian school, this was the way to go, and I've never stopped reading in it. There's always more to learn. I mean, I love meeting people. There are some people on this earth who always want to be around people who are not as smart as they are. I'm the exact opposite. I want to be surrounded by people who are 50 times smarter than I am, because I have so much I still want to learn. And I always try, that's why I try to have lunch with Joe Salerno as much as I can. You know, we'll try and talk sports here and there, and then I'll just slip in a question about velocity of money. You know, he hasn't realized this trick yet. So little by little I'm improving my knowledge, but it was because of the Mises Institute. So that's why what's going on here is so important, and maybe someday you guys will have a Mises University Brazil for a week, and you will be able to spread the knowledge even more.
Hello, very inspiring answer. Tem pergunta da plateia?
Eu tenho uma dúvida em relação ao período à década de 1920, que é o seguinte: o Rothbard, no livro dele, America's Great Depression, ele diz que de 1921 a 1929 você teve um aumento muito grande da base monetária. A minha pergunta é a seguinte: o quanto que a recuperação depois da depressão de 22 foi devido ao excesso ao aumento da base monetária, e o quanto que foi devido às políticas do presidente?
Okay. Well, it looks to me, from having looked at the data, that the Fed doesn't move to increase the monetary base until 1922. And at least according to the National Bureau of Economic Research, the depression of 20 and 21 is over by the end of the summer of 1921. Now, having said that, we still might wonder about the rest of the 1920s, and which I think this is why we have to be careful just to say, isn't it wonderful, the presidents all lowered tax rates and we had a fantastic free market 1920s. I was just interviewed on this very subject. In fact, I think it might even be airing today on a TV show on Fox News, which you shouldn't all hate Fox News. They have one good person there, a Judge Napolitano. But anyway, they had me on to talk about the Depression 1920, and the other people they were going to have were all basically saying the 1920s were fantastic because of the free market policies. And I said, I think it's important for us to insert a major caveat here, which is the Federal Reserve's policy, the inflationary policy. Because if we say the free market was at work in the 1920s, then where did 1929 come from? That becomes the question. So, and also Calvin Coolidge, the president in the second part of the 20s, was not very concerned about what the Fed was doing. I mean, explicitly. This was one area where Herbert Hoover was good. Herbert Hoover was worried about the 20s inflation. And Coolidge thought, oh, this is typical bonehead Herbert Hoover. Who cares about him? Don't worry about it. It seems to me like the major spikes come in 1924 and then from 1927 through 1928. So, but I don't think it's possible to quantify, to say this portion of the prosperity was phony, this was real. I don't think we ever can say that, but we can say qualitatively that the economy was not fully healthy because its resources were being at least partially misdirected. I mean, the boom that the U.S. just endured was not all phony. Like, it's not, but we can never exactly say which activities are what we might call false activities. We can begin to understand that in the bust phase, as we see things liquidated. We can get a rough estimate, but even then there is not an exact one-to-one correspondence between a project that shouldn't have been started and a project that's liquidated. It's not quite so simple. So I'm not sure there really is a very easy answer, a quantifiable answer, other than simply to say that some portion of it was unsound because of the Fed. I don't think we can go further than that.